Welcome to War Remains. Dan Carlin presents. Siren 1 presents. Here we are. We're in World War I. What could go wrong?
Someday we're going to be able to preserve memories, save them in a way where they can be incorporated into the history books, and you can download them, and then walk a mile in the moccasins of the people of the past. But there are good memories, and then there are bad memories. And there's something fascinating, isn't there, about the most extreme memories of human history? If you could actually download a flashback of, say, the Western Front of the First World War, it might be the most intense thing you could ever experience. You would be present then for a war that was meant to end all wars, supposedly. You would instead be watching modern warfare begin. That conflict marked the murderous dawn of an era, where a mechanized, industrialized, and efficient 20th century dragged the old, honorable, glorious, romantic 19th century across the muddy fields of Flanders and shot it in a trench. When you're ready, if you're ready, for even a simulation of what actual people went through, follow in the footsteps of the soldier in front of you as he steps straight into the fire of the First World War. The world was thoroughly 19th century. At the beginning of this war, you have French soldiers marching off to battle with a sense of romance, expecting honor and glory. And when these 19th century troops, wearing red pants and blue jackets with tails, encounter 20th century machine guns and giant artillery pieces, the French are torn to shreds. Nobody had expected anything quite like this. How could they? Automobiles, for example, are new in the First World War. Submarines that can travel under the surface of the sea and attack shipping? That's right out of a Jules Verne book. And how about the H.G. Wells-like science fiction air machines that are filling the sky in numbers for really the first time ever? Kind of mechanization and the growth of industry and assembly lines and factories will become the hallmarks of war in the 20th century. But this is really the first time you get to see them. The power of all this new weaponry and all the steel in the air make it suicidal for people to stay above ground. And that's how you get the growth of these trenches, stretching all the way, eventually, from the mountains to the sea, across the entire Western Front. The terrain becomes hideous and gruesome, and the artillery barrages turn the landscape into a totally alien-looking environment, like the moon, only weirder. Some of the battles from this war are legendary. Meat grinders like Verdun, or the Somme, a months-long battle where the British attackers, on the very first day, suffer 58,000 casualties. But Third Ypres, often called Passchendaele, took that horrific, Mordor-like, hellish landscape and flooded it with double the normal rainfall. Just when you thought a combat environment couldn't get any more nightmarish, impossibly, Passchendaele does. correspondent Philip Gibbs described one of these artillery barrages he witnessed and said, quote, "Then, suddenly, as though at the tap of a baton, a great orchestra of death crashed out." It is absurd to describe it. No words have been made for modern bombardment of this intensity. One can only give a feeble, inaccurate notion of what one big shell sounds like. When hundreds of heavy guns are firing upon one small line of traffic, and shells of the greatest size are rushing through the sky in flocks and bursting in masses, all description is futile. They call this sort of shelling drum fire, and that's because the ordnance is hitting so rapidly that it sounds like a drum roll, doesn't it? We're only going to be here for a few minutes. If I locked you in here for 24 hours, what do you think you'd be like when you came out? Imagine withstanding this sort of thing for weeks or even months, and you can't just take the VR headset off when you're afraid. These artillery strikes drove people insane. The shockwaves may have literally shattered their nerves. Remember something. I don't care how bad it seems. On the Western Front of the First World War, things can always get worse. They can always get much, much worse. You still can't visit some of these battlefields to this day. Even 100 years later, they're still polluted with things like arsenic and mercury and lead. And oh yeah, millions upon millions of unexploded shells. Every so often, a member of the cleanup crews will be killed when one of these old munitions detonates. If a shell fired during the First World War kills somebody cleaning it up today, is that another First World War casualty? In some very literal ways, this war remains present in our lives, and not just physically. The collective psychological scarring that comes from surviving something like this can affect entire societies far into the future. The people who made it home from this war, including soon-to-be world leaders like Churchill and Hitler, experienced things that you just had the tiniest taste of, but they did it for real, and then somehow had to move on and make the modern world. Maybe it helps us to better understand our times if we recall that they were built and nearly destroyed again, in large part by a generation of traumatized survivors, forever reliving an early 20th century nightmare. How do you describe the indescribable? Sometimes it takes an artist. British Western Front soldier and painter Paul Nash had a keen eye for the landscape and tried to describe to his wife in a November 1917 letter what a trip up to the front lines was like and what it had done to him. He wrote, "I shall not forget it as long as I live. I have seen the most frightful nightmare of a country more conceived by Dante or Poe than by nature. Unspeakable, utterly indescribable. I may give you some idea of its horror, but only being in it and of it can make you sensible of its dreadful nature. We all have a vague notion of the terrors of a battle, but no pen or drawing can convey this country. Evil and the incarnate fiend alone can be master of this war. No glimmer of God's hand is seen anywhere. Sunset and sunrise are blasphemous. They are mockeries to man. The rain drives on, and the shells never cease. They alone plunge overhead, tearing away the rotting tree stumps, breaking the plank roads, striking down horses and mules, annihilating, maiming, maddening. They plunge into the grave that is this land. It is unspeakable, godless, hopeless. I am no longer an artist, interested and curious. I am a messenger who will bring back word from the men who are fighting to those who want this war to go on forever. Feeble, inarticulate will be my message, but it will have a bitter truth, and may it burn their lousy souls."
Wow. Thank you for watching. More Remains. Thank you for watching More Remains with me. That was pretty immersive. Yeah. The Great War to end all wars.